Less than 3 weeks before the presidential election, the candidates are on the road and on the air, reaching out to those last persuadable voters.
In states across America, this November, your vote could have a big impact on pro-life laws. But here in Nebraska, there's something on the ballot that has never been tried before. I'm Mark Irons. We've got that story coming up.
Abortion on the ballot, we are on the ground in Nebraska. And the shocking findings from Ireland on clergy sexual abuse in Catholic schools. An in-depth look at the government investigation and what it could mean for the Catholic Church. A special report from correspondent Colm Flynn. EWTN News in Depth starts now.
There's probably no more important time to vote than for this.
Getting out the vote on Election Day for abortion ballot initiatives across the country. Much of this election's focus is on the White House and Congress, but pro-life advocates say new life is at stake in these all-important ballot measures. Welcome to EWTN News in Depth. I'm Catherine Hadro. The final search for votes is on as the presidential candidates blanket the airwaves with rallies, interviews, and campaign ads, and to fill social media with messaging designed to target those last undecided voters.
We are here today because we share a core belief that we must put country before party.
On Wednesday, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke in historic Washington Crossing, Pennsylvania, joined on stage by a coalition of Republican leaders who are backing her over her opponent, Donald Trump. Immediately afterwards, she appeared on Fox News for her first ever interview on the network. In an often contentious interview with anchor Bret Baier, she addressed questions about border policy and sparred with him about what Trump meant when he called Americans who disagree with him the enemy within.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff, and it's my favorite word.
On Tuesday, at an appearance at the Economic Club of Chicago, former President Trump promoted his support for high tariffs on foreign goods, despite the host from Bloomberg News pressing him about the cost of tariffs being passed along to American consumers. Trump said the higher the tariff, the more likely the company would come to the U.S. and build a factory. Trump also held several town hall events throughout the week, ranging from one in Pennsylvania with host Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota, one on Spanish network Univision, and another with women voters in Georgia on Fox News. This year, many Americans will not only cast ballots for the president, but also on the issue of abortion, as a record number of states bring the issue directly to voters through special ballot initiatives. In 10 states, voters will decide whether to include what's called a right to abortion in their state constitution. Those states are Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, New York, South Dakota, and Nebraska. The ballot initiative decision in Nebraska is unique among all the rest. For the first time in any state, voters will be faced with two competing initiatives, one crafted by pro-life advocates, the other by those on the pro-abortion side. Mark Irons reports from Nebraska.
On South 48th Street in Lincoln, Nebraska, there are two competing options. On one side of the road, an affiliate of Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider. Across the street, the Women's Care Center, providing free pregnancy tests and ultrasounds and offering women and their babies support.
The fundamental difference, I would say, is hope, because at the Women's Care Center, we're giving women the opportunity to have their child and have a life with them. And at Planned Parenthood, they're taking away any opportunity for joy that comes with that new life.
Isabella is just one of the Catholic students from the University of Nebraska who meets outside the Planned Parenthood weekly to pray for unborn children and their mothers. They hope women considering abortion will instead choose to go across the street to the Women's Care Center. They think it's the option that could help heal and save lives. On Election Day here in Nebraska, voters will also have competing options, and we're told what they choose could also save lives.
This is going to be the difference between a culture of life in Nebraska or a culture of abortion in Nebraska.
On the ballot, for the first time in state history, Nebraskans will vote for or against two separate competing initiatives, Measure 434 and Measure 439.
What do people need to know about these two initiatives?
If Initiative 434 can't beat Initiative 439 at the ballot, unfortunately, we might be left with Initiative 439, which I tell people is worse than Roe versus Wade.
Tom Vinzer directs the Nebraska Catholic Conference. In collaboration with the state's Catholic bishops, the conference is trying to get the word out.
Initiative 439 is a very extreme proposal that allows abortions throughout the entire pregnancy, 28 weeks, 30 weeks, 32 weeks, 36 weeks. Alternatively, you have Initiative 434, which provides some protection in the second and third trimester for the unborn child, but then allows us to continue regulating against unsafe and coercive abortion practices.
A Nebraska law passed last year bans abortion after 12 weeks of pregnancy. Now, voters will first see Initiative 434 on their ballot. It's backed by pro-life groups and would help safeguard the abortion ban. Initiative 439, last on the ballot, is backed by pro-abortion groups like Planned Parenthood, who are telling voters what to do.
Hi, I'm Adele with Planned Parenthood Advocates of Nebraska. Vote against 434 to end Nebraska's abortion ban. Vote for 439.
But in the back of churches throughout Nebraska, displays are visible and pamphlets available so Catholics can remind voters to do the opposite.
The church is asking voters to vote against Initiative 439 and for Initiative 434.
Whichever initiative passes with greater support will go into the state constitution. Initiative 434 states in part, unborn children shall be protected from abortion in the second and third trimester. While Initiative 439 wipes out pro-life protections in Nebraska, it states in part, all persons shall have a fundamental right to abortion until fetal viability.
When they talk about it on the political front, it's often assumed that there's a definition of viability, and there just isn't.
Dr. Catherine Brooks, a neonatologist and pediatrician in Lincoln, sharing her medical expertise, says the vague language in 439 doesn't leave any room for restrictions, and what it would allow is extreme.
I think 439 is vague intentionally, and that's so that people don't understand what it's saying. But from a medical perspective and a legal perspective, it's allowing abortion at any gestation for any reason.
Brooks works in the neonatal intensive care unit caring for premature babies who might need some additional support before they leave the hospital. She notices something in all of them.
They get bigger and they learn how to eat and they're breathing on their own and all of that stuff, but their personalities are also unique.
Tom Vinzer knows that from personal experience, even in the short time he had with his daughter Therese, who was born 3 months premature. She dealt with complications and only lived for 2 weeks.
People might consider abortion because they say, oh, my child won't live a good life, or they'll have health complications, or maybe they won't live very long. What did it mean to you to have a daughter who did live for just 2 weeks, but you had her for 2 weeks?
I know my personal experiences, those 2 weeks were beautiful. They were wonderful. We never knew if we were going to get 1 second with her. We didn't know if when she was delivered, she was going to make it. And so to have any amount of time with her was precious, not only in the womb, but outside of the womb, and to look at her, to see her face. It taught us how to love more deeply. She taught us how to love.
Back on South 48th Street, the Catholic college students hope to be a witness of love to mothers.
You're not alone. You have so many people praying for you right now.
And their babies.
Every innocent baby deserves a chance to life.
And in Nebraska, pro-lifers say a vote for Initiative 434 and against Initiative 439 could make all the difference.
How close do you think this is going to be?
These are two initiatives that are neck and neck, so we know that they're very close. Every vote matters.
Mark Irons, EWTN News, in depth.
While in Nebraska, Mark also sat down with Catholic State Senator Mike McDonnell, a pro-life Democrat who changed his party affiliation to Republican this year after he was pushed out.
Do you think the Democratic Party didn't respect your faith-based beliefs?
Well, when they censured me and wouldn't seat me as a delegate based on my pro-life position, and again, I wasn't asking them to agree with me, I was just asking them to respect that position that I held my whole life.
Catch Mark's interview with McDonnell next week on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly on Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Now, to provide further insight on Nebraska's initiatives as well as abortion measures from across the country, we are joined by Chelsey Youman. She is the National Legislative Advisor for Human Coalition Action. Chelsey, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Nebraska is the only state with competing abortion-related measures on the ballot. Can you first speak to the unique nature of what's happening in Nebraska, and won't this situation ultimately be confusing for voters at the ballot box?
You know, it's interesting you say that because Nebraska is taking, as you know, a unique approach to this issue and fighting back, saying that we're not going to accept the pro-abortion industry's rampant push of extreme constitutional measures to allow abortion on demand without limits throughout the entire pregnancy, all 3 trimesters. And so they're giving voters another option, an option to say, we're going to vote to protect children past the 12-week mark, but also, importantly, allow the legislator there in Nebraska to continue to protect children in the womb before 12 weeks. It's an important measure, and I think it's important for us to know it took the pro-abortionists really 7 months to get the requisite amount of signatures, 200,000 signatures, and it took the pro-lifers only 3 months to get the same amount of signatures. Okay. So don't always believe the polling. Don't always believe what, mass media is telling you. The pro-life vote is alive and well and active like it never has been. And now is that time for us to lean in more than ever.
Okay, that's good to hear. And Nebraska is just one of 10 states with abortion on the ballot this November. Chelsey, what are some trends that you're noticing with how these abortion measures are being presented? And has the pro-life movement learned from its state failures since the Dobbs decision?
I certainly hope that it has. One thing we have certainly learned is that it takes time to educate the grassroots, to educate the voters, because there's such a massive campaign of misleading disinformation and marketing around these ballot measures, fear-mongering around these ballot measures. The truth is, in pro-life states, all 50 states protect women from medical emergencies. That's not only a Supreme Court requirement, but at the state level, statutory requirements. And the other thing we're learning is that the longer that we have these conversations at the grassroots, at the church level, at the local level, with our families and communities, the more people realize the value of innocent human life, and the more people realize how extreme these measures are. And so my encouragement to you is, let's take Arizona as a prime example. As of June, the vote was up to 59% in the polling for the abortion measure. And now today, we have insider intel that the polling is down to 51%. Those conversations matter. Continuing to have those conversations around our dinner table. It doesn't require you to be a policy group. It requires you to have a voice for the unborn. And we're all responsible for that.
That's a good reminder. And Chelsey, looking to Florida specifically, recent polls show the pro-abortion ballot initiative there is on track to fail. Florida requires a 60% approval to amend the state constitution, and it is falling short on that. The New York Times Siena College poll found 46% of voters support the abortion measure. 38% would vote against it, and 16% do not know or they refuse to answer. So, Chelsey, what's your reaction to this polling? Is the Sunshine State providing another ray of hope here that pro-lifers can succeed at the state level?
It absolutely is. We know that among Hispanic voters, it's as much as almost 68% of Hispanic voters want to protect life and children in the womb from death by abortion. We also know that even among women voters, every decade older they get, the more pro-life they get. This is a message to Republicans and Democrats alike. This election, more than ever, as pro-life voters, we need to show up and tell them we will not stand for a country that aborts innocent children in the womb. We will vote for pro-life measures, and we want to hold also our candidates accountable to protecting innocent life in the womb. I think our votes on these issues in these states will be the loudest thing we can do to send that message and protect the unborn.
Chelsey, I have just over 1 minute left, but I want to get to this question. This week, the Harris Walls campaign released a new ad centered on the story of Amber Thurman. Let's take a listen.
The death of Amber Thurman was likely preventable if she'd had access to abortion care in her home state of Georgia.
What happened to her was preventable. My daughter is gone because of what Donald Trump did.
Chelsey, Amber Thurman's story, it's tragic. At 28, she died due to complications from taking the abortion pills. But the Harris campaign is blaming her death on Georgia's pro-life law instead. With our minute remaining, how much do stories like Amber's play into this election season? And do they scare voters away from pro-life protections?
they do scare voters, but let's educate the voter. She died because she took abortion drugs and died from complications from those abortion drugs. Not only was her abortion successful, but it also took her own life, the life of her and her child. This is tragic, and it falls squarely at the feet of the abortion industry.
Chelsey, so grateful for your insight, especially as we get closer and closer to that election day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
For information about voting from a Catholic perspective, you can turn to the EWTN 2024 Voter Guide. It covers issues ranging from abortion and life to immigration to foreign policy to the economy. It is available on the website of our sister publication, the National Catholic Register, at ncregister.com. On Thursday night, both presidential candidates tried their hand at comedy at the annual Al Smith Charity Dinner. The high-profile fundraiser raises money for Catholic charities, and presidential candidates have traditionally attended to poke playful jabs at one another. Kamala Harris remained on the campaign trail and chose not to attend the dinner, which Donald Trump made note of in his remarks.
Always it's a rule. You got to go to the dinner. You got to do it. Otherwise, bad things are going to happen to you from up there. My opponent feels like she does not have to be here, which is deeply disrespectful to the event and in particular to our great Catholic community. Very disrespectful.
Trump went on to further poke fun at Harris, her running mate Tim Walz, and New York Mayor Eric Adams. While Harris was not there in person, she did send greetings in a pre-recorded sketch video with a Saturday Night Live veteran comedian. A correction now to a report we brought you last week about then U.S. Senator Kamala Harris and pointed questions she posed several years ago to 3 federal judiciary nominees over their involvement with the Knights of Columbus. In our report, we quoted Harris as saying the Knights of Columbus has taken a number of extreme positions. That specific quote should have been attributed to Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii. We regret our error. The other quotes we included from Harris scrutinizing the Knights were accurate. And this final political item. The Carter Center in Atlanta says 100-year-old former President Jimmy Carter has cast his ballot in this year's presidential election. He voted by mail on Wednesday, his absentee ballot deposited in a drop box at the county courthouse near his home in Plains. Last month, his grandson said President Carter told him he did not care so much about his 100th birthday on October 1st. He cared more about living until he could vote. Early voting in Georgia began on Tuesday. Next, we tackle the very difficult subject of clerical sex abuse. A major settlement announced this week in Los Angeles, and we go in depth on the disturbing government report from Ireland, investigating decades of abuse at Catholic schools there.
Day after day, we had people revealing for the first time their abuse in the school and the cover-up.
Inside the investigation of what happened to more than 2,000 children over decades in Irish Catholic schools. Correspondent Colm Flynn talks to survivors as well as the Archbishop of Dublin when we return.
In what is the largest single-child sex abuse settlement with a Catholic archdiocese, it was announced this week the Archdiocese of Los Angeles will pay $880 million to survivors of clergy sexual abuse dating back decades. Attorneys for 1,353 survivors alleging abuse reached the settlement after months of negotiations. It caps a quarter-century of litigation against the largest U.S. archdiocese. The Archdiocese says the alleged acts of abuse were committed by clergy, some by lay people, and some by religious order priests and clergy from other dioceses that were serving there. The Los Angeles Times is reporting this puts the Archdiocese's total payout at more than $1.5 billion after previously paying $740 million in other settlements. In an open letter to the LA faith community, Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles stated in part, "I am sorry for every one of these incidents from the bottom of my heart. My hope is that this settlement will provide some measure of healing for what these men and women have suffered. Let us continue to pray for every person who has suffered childhood sexual abuse, which truly is a scourge that afflicts not only the church, but every area of our society." A horrific report has been published by the Irish government detailing sexual abuse of children in schools run by Catholic religious orders. Ireland's education minister calls the findings shocking and said it was the first time the scale of abuse has been disclosed. The report documented nearly 2,400 credible allegations of sexual abuse in more than 300 Catholic schools, perpetrated by nearly 900 abusers. The allegations were from 1927 to 2013, with direct testimonies related to the years between the 1960s and 1990s. More than half of the accused are now dead or very elderly. The victims said the abuse happened in classrooms, dormitories, sports facilities, and at musical and other extracurricular activities. The report quotes many commenting that their childhood stopped the day the abuse began, and their belief that the abuse was so pervasive it could not possibly have gone unnoticed by other adult staff members. The Irish government says it will now establish a full statutory investigation following the findings of the report. It's believed the investigation will reveal yet more abuse, since the primary source of data for this initial report was from the religious orders and the schools themselves. EWTN News in Depth correspondent Colm Flynn traveled to Ireland to learn more. A warning: this news report contains graphic information and wording to convey the gravity of the victim's experience.
Growing up in Dublin, David Ryan would serve at Mass, and his brother Mark attended a prestigious boarding school called Black Rock, run by the Holy Ghost Fathers. And one of the priests was very friendly with their family.
He came to my parents' house and he just wormed his way into their home. He even celebrated Mass in our home a few times. Easter, special anniversaries, he would come up and celebrate Mass.
He was very much trusted and admired by the family.
100%.
David loved to swim, and when he was around 11 years of age, Father O'Byrne invited him and some friends down to the school swimming pool.
And I started going more and more because I was really interested in swimming. I wanted to be a swimmer. I was strong, and he encouraged me to do it. And I'd often go down and practice 4 or 5 times, in the evening, just to do length after length after length. And he would come in and lock the door. He'd make us wear thongs and put them on. And he'd sometimes walk around the pool naked. And then he'd get into the pool with us and he'd make us float on our backs like a crucifix. But he'd be groping us underneath the whole time. He'd take photographs. I thought of my face, but he wasn't. He was taking my lower with the thongs on. And he'd often say, come down to the lower shower, which was down at the back, but it was the warmest one. So he'd literally get me into the shower and he'd rape me.
For years, the abuse continued, and David stayed quiet. But then the parents of another student in the school made a complaint against the priest, and Father O'Byrne was sent away for treatment. But a few weeks later, returned to teach at the school, where he saw David once again.
I came in, he locked the door behind me, he told me to get naked, told me to lie down on the bed. He got my hands and he tied them. He got on top of me and he raped me again.
Father O'Byrne warned him to keep it a secret, and David did.
I never said a word, never said a word.
Stories like these are painful to hear, but sadly, they are the reality of what happened to many people in religious-run schools in Ireland.
My name is David Ryan, originally from Blackrock in County Dublin, now living in County Tipperary.
In 2022, David Ryan and his brother Mark, after 40 years of staying quiet, came forward and told their story in a radio documentary entitled Blackrock Boys.
We grew up in a cul-de-sac at home in Blackrock.
The programme was produced by the Doc on One team at RTE, the public broadcaster of Ireland.
For more than 20 years, David and Mark had been trying to deal with the abuse on their own. But David now knew.
And the man who made it is award-winning producer Liam O'Brien.
Once this story had got out, the identity of both Mark and David were forever changed. Their identities would never again be the same.
The radio documentary had a huge impact in Ireland, making headline news.
Once victims heard the vulnerability and then saw the bravery and courage, I think that really empowered a lot of other victims. And then that's a domino and cascade effect.
Liveline on RTE Radio 1.
After David and Mark had told their story, one of Ireland's biggest radio shows, Liveline, was inundated with calls.
You say it is time that I told my story and rid myself of the shame and the guilt.
Yeah.
Its presenter is Joe Duffy.
The abuse started, so I would have been 8, 9 at the time.
When you were getting those calls, Joe, from up and down the country, what was the feeling of people? Was it shock? Was it disappointment? Was it dismay?
No, it was anger.
Anger.
It was anger. And day after day, we had people revealing for the first time their abuse in the school and the cover-up.
Over and over, what the people were saying was that they wanted justice. But then the question was, what kind of justice and from who? As many of these cases were going back decades.
Restorative justice does not apply where the victims are all relatively old, but that the perpetrators are dead. You cannot confront the perpetrator unless you regard the perpetrator as this organisation called a religious order.
We reached out to a number of the religious orders asking for interviews, but unfortunately, they said that they were not in a position to do so at this time. However, Bishop Dermot Farrell, the Archbishop of Dublin, was willing to sit down on camera. How did this happen? What went so wrong?
I think to understand it, one has to try and understand the pervasiveness of the education system in Ireland, particularly back in the 40s and 50s and 60s when I was going to school, that was a culture of, I suppose, violence and punishment. And it was almost endemic in the system. Not every teacher, but there were people in the system who were quite abusive.
People look at society and they know that this is a problem that's not focused and exclusive to religious orders or the Catholic Church. It's a societal problem.
It's a societal problem.
But the bar, I suppose you could say, is much higher for men and women of God.
Absolutely.
People who have these high moral values.
You have high moral values, there's the integrity, there's the hypocrisy, so all of those things come into play. So there is a higher standard expected of the ministers of the Catholic Church, and that wasn't the case, certainly with people who perpetrated the abuse.
And what is the Catholic Church's understanding here in Ireland when they look inwards at itself and the religious orders of how it happened?
Well, when people came to know, the punishment element was known. Like every student who went to school here was aware of the punishment, and they were aware that sometimes that punishment was too severe. When people then come to the realization of the sexual abuse, there was no effort made to deal with the perpetrators. Sometimes they were left in situ, sometimes they were moved around, because I think there was maybe a thinking that the problem was with the person that they were involved in rather than the actual perpetrator. So if you move them somewhere else, that'll deal with the problem. But of course,
they were putting the blame on the victim.
Exactly, on the survivor, absolutely.
In the south of Ireland, in Ballincollig, lives Cornelius Crowley. He too is a survivor.
But why do we survivors have to demand justice?
From the age of 6, he was in religious-run boarding schools. And while he doesn't like to talk about what happened, he remembers how he felt.
I remember the absolute shock and fear and terror that just went right into me because I was just a small child.
Did you ever tell anyone about it at the time?
No, I couldn't. I couldn't even speak to other students about it. I just endured it day after day after day after day.
Again, like so many others, Cornelius kept it as a dark secret for months, for years, for decades.
Because we cope and manage, we think that's okay and that's enough. But coping isn't enough. Coping isn't being fully alive and present and loving and vulnerable and open. It's always a shielded place.
It was only 3 years ago, at the age of 62, that Cornelius went for counselling through a group called Towards Healing, which is funded by the Catholic Church.
Because I didn't know that little Cornelius didn't deserve all that, and did deserve actually every possible loving assistance to recover, to deal with this.
Lord have mercy. A truly horrible situation for so many innocent victims. So, what happens now? Colm explores the question of accountability when we come back from this break. More now into the investigation of sexual abuse of minors in Ireland's Catholic schools. What is the way forward for the survivors? Our special report from correspondent Colm Flynn continues.
How does the church even begin to try and be with those victims, help them in whatever way they can?
Listening to the stories, understanding the stories, accepting the truth of those stories.
Should the church and the religious orders pay compensation to the victims?
I think the religious orders, if they knew about cases and they came forward, have settled many of those cases.
The Catholic Church and religious orders in Ireland, like in many other parts of the world, have been paying out compensation for a number of years now. But with the publication of this government report, which documented cases that had already been known and settled, but also new ones where the victims have not yet been recognised, the question now is who should be paid compensation, how much should it be, and where that compensation should come from.
The report has recommended that the government consider a redress scheme for survivors.
The Irish government is saying that most of the blame lays with the religious orders, but others want to see the government take account of its role in this scandal. At Leinster House, the Irish government buildings in Dublin, Senator Ronan Mullen has written about this scandal, calling for government accountability and greater fairness when it comes to compensating the victims.
It suits the Taoiseach and it suits the state, which has disproportionate resources, to say, you know, this is mainly a religious orders problem and they are the ones we need to chase down for money. But that's being selective and that's being perhaps a bit cynical.
Is it not mainly a religious order problem when they were the ones running the schools?
Well, undoubtedly a great many of the schools in Ireland were run by religious orders. It's to the Church's credit that it was in the business of providing so much education and healthcare. The problem is also that we've only had a scoping inquiry into religious run schools, and the hundreds of state established and state run secondary schools were not covered at all. In this case, most people in Ireland have, to my mind, a distorted idea that sexual abuse is mainly a religious orders problem so far as schools were concerned, and don't have the information about what the religious orders have been doing in the area of child protection in the now, and also redress for the evils and wrongs of the past.
So what is the Church doing now to protect children and those most vulnerable? In response to the global sexual abuse crisis in the Catholic Church, in 2013, Pope Francis established the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, an independent institution connected with the Vatican to introduce and implement world-class safeguarding measures for children across the Church. Teresa Devlin works with the Commission. How different is the Church of today and its institutions? How different is it to the Church of those days when this horrific abuse was able to take place?
Yeah, it was done in darkness in the past. We now have very good mechanisms for ensuring that proper procedures are in place. So all children are aware of and are educated in how to keep safe. But it's not their responsibility, it is the responsibility of the adults. So the adults in the Church are trained, they are supported, they follow a code of behaviour in relation to supervision, how to behave with children, how to interact online. And then most critically and importantly, there is a system of audit, review and inspection. And if you talk to most people, they would say that the Church in Ireland is a safer place today than other aspects of life.
Archbishop Dermot Farrell says that the entire ordeal is like an open wound in Ireland, which will continue to cause pain and suffering.
It is a wound in the church, and that wound will only be healed when we have full transparency through accountability. That's the challenge for the church today, because until that happens...
Is the church ready for that challenge?
Yes. Yeah, we are. We have been always encouraging people to come forward at every opportunity, that people who have been abused come forward, and we try and have accountability and justice for them, because that's the only way we'll make a safer environment for our children.
And for the victims, even with compensation paid, apologies said, that wound is still very painful.
If you met today those priests and religious who perpetrated those crimes against you, what would you say to them?
Go to jail. Go to jail where you can't harm anybody ever again.
And for David, well, tragically, his brother Mark died suddenly of a major stroke last year. David believes from the stress of sharing his abuse story, the stress of a secret he had kept for 40 years.
Do you ever think you will step back inside a church again?
No, never. Never want to see it.
The trust has been broken so badly, it's gone. What would you like to see happen? In your mind, what is justice?
It ruined my life. It ruined Mark's life. My brother's now gone. And other people are only starting to come forward now. Their lives have been ruined. And we need justice. These other priests are dead. They're dead. But there are people still alive, and they have to be brought to justice. Age is only a number. Doesn't matter. They have to be tried and put down.
In Ireland, Colm Flynn, EWTN News in depth.
Sadly, there is much more to Colm's report. Additional comments from each of the people he interviewed are in his story on the EWTN YouTube page. As Ireland reels from the disclosure of clergy sexual abuse that has affected so many people, we are reminded that this scourge is one that knows no borders. The Catholic Church has had to face up to such charges on an international scale. To discuss that, we are joined now by Stephen White. Stephen is the executive director of the Catholic Project, leading the Catholic University of America's response to the clergy abuse crisis with a specific focus on the collaboration of clergy and the laity. He also served as executive producer for the award-winning podcast Crisis: Clergy Abuse in the Catholic Church. Stephen, thank you for being here. I first want to get your reaction to this shocking report from Ireland. Nearly 900 alleged sexual abusers at more than 300 schools between 1927 and 2013. It's devastating.
Yeah, it can become easy to get used to these kinds of stories. We've heard so many here in the United States. We've heard them in Ireland. We've heard them in Australia, in France, and in Germany, and around a lot of the world. I think it can become numbing to sort of keep sort of receiving these waves and waves of abuse stories like this, where the scale is hard to imagine. I think it's important to keep in mind that we in the United States, in a lot of ways, are a couple decades ahead of where a lot of the rest of the global church is when it comes to dealing with this, and in a lot of ways being forced to deal with this, often against the church's desire. But a lot of the world is still playing catch up.
Yeah. And just this week, Stephen, major news out of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles as it pays $880 million to survivors of clergy sexual abuse dating back decades. And this is the result of a 2019 California law that removed the statute of limitations on child sexual abuse civil claims for a period of 3 years. Stephen, do you think should more states pass similar laws to bring about transparency and healing here?
I think most of the states that will pass those sorts of laws already have. I think the moment immediately following the summer of 2018 and into 2019 was a moment when that was the political window for those kinds of look-back windows and those kinds of laws was right. And you've seen it in a lot of states. I mean, up and down the East Coast, New York, Maryland, California, obviously. This is actually the second massive settlement that the Archdiocese of Los Angeles has paid out. The previous one was almost $800 million. So this brings it to about $1.5 billion total that the Archdiocese of Los Angeles has paid out in settlements with abuse survivors.
And Stephen, as we're discussing these news headlines, we obviously cannot lose sight of the survivors themselves and their stories and what they are saying. In your work in responding to clerical sexual abuse, what are you hearing from survivors? What do they want the church to know?
Well, I can't speak for survivors. I can't speak for any one of them, or let alone all of them as a group. But many of the ones that I've spoken to have been some of the most edifying examples of people who have every reason to resent the church, to turn their back on the church, but who've been working very hard and very tirelessly to help the church heal from this, not just to bring healing to themselves and to other survivors, but to really help the church move forward in a way that's good for the whole church. That kind of a commitment to to the church, and the understanding that the church is something we all need, that the church is for those who are broken and for sinners and for everybody. Seeing that kind of commitment and work coming from survivors has been incredibly edifying, even through some really sort of dark and unpleasant times for the church.
When it comes to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles and its settlement this week, most of the alleged acts of abuse took place more than 50 years ago. And I don't say that to belittle these cases, but to ask you, Stephen, what can you say about the Catholic Church's efforts to strengthen its protections against clerical abuse since then, since that time period? What protections are now in place?
Well, I already mentioned that we've had a lot of time in the United States, more than 2 decades now, since the Dallas Charter and the first major wave of the abuse crisis broke. We've had a lot of time in the United States to get better at this. We're not perfect by any stretch, but when it comes to reporting, mandatory reporting to civil authorities is something we do in the United States. Every diocese has a victims assistance coordinator whose job is to meet with those who come forward with allegations. That's required in every diocese. We audit all of those dioceses. On top of that, you've seen programs like this where you have dioceses working with representatives of survivors in order to work out massive, often, but just compensation packages that don't fulfill the debt of justice, but go a long ways towards doing that, while also leaving intact the church's ability to continue its ministry. So the church in the United States, in a lot of places, and we see this acutely in Los Angeles right now, is paying for sins that happened a long time ago. But that's incumbent upon us as Catholics we are a member of the church. We don't get to pick and choose which parts of that we are responsible for. And so helping to move towards healing is something that is important. And I think, there are a few places in the country today that are safer for children than the Catholic Church. And it's my hope that the rest of the world can learn from our mistakes, but also learn from what we've gotten right in the last 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephen, the group that you lead, the Catholic Project, it focuses on the collaboration of the clergy and the laity in responding to the clerical sexual abuse crisis. So what should that collaboration look like? Is there anything our lay Catholic viewers, for example, can do to advance this collaboration?
Yeah, well, I think it begins with avoiding the kind of animosity that makes this about sort of laity versus clergy. Lay people need our priests. We need our bishops. We ought to want them to be better at their jobs. And if they're going to be better at their jobs, not just with regard to the abuse crisis, but with regard to a lot of aspects of life in the church, they need the help and the support of the laity. So trying to address challenges like the abuse crisis through the lens of collaboration, through the lens of we're all in this together. We all have some kind of responsibility for the mission of the church by virtue of our baptism. How can we address those challenges in a way that builds on those strengths and that kind of collaboration rather than sort of adds to division in the church?
And I just have 1 minute left with you, Stephen, but is there any specific action you would like to see the Vatican take to improve the church's response to clerical sexual abuse?
Well, I think the Vatican in the last couple of years has taken some significant steps, at least on paper. I think one of the things that remains to be done is for there to be a sort of greater transparency in what steps are being taken in particular cases, and a more sort of even-handed and regular application of the law that the church does have. When the church applies the law in a way that seems uneven or selective, that undermines confidence. I think to restore confidence, we need transparency, and we need a more even-handed approach to the application of the laws we already have.
Well, Stephen, I thank you for your work in the church and for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And if you or someone you know has questions or concerns about clerical sexual abuse, resources are available at thecatholicproject.catholic.edu or through the Victims Assistance Office in your diocese. News headlines are next in the Week in Review. The Hamas leader who planned the October 7th attacks is taken down. Hostage parents speak, and FEMA determined to help despite threats to its workers.
The score is settled with Sinwar, who was responsible for that very, very difficult day we experienced a year ago.
After more than a year of warfare, Israel found its enemy number one. Yahya Sinwar, the key architect of Hamas's attack on October 7th last year, is dead. The death of the Hamas leader tops the Week in Review. Israel confirmed Sinwar's death through DNA testing on Thursday and Hamas on Friday. For more than a year, Israel poured vast resources into its hunt for Sinwar. But in the end, a unit of trainee squad commanders stumbled upon the elusive and powerful leader while engaging in a firefight with Palestinian militants in southern Gaza on Wednesday. Sinwar is attributed with planning the scale of the October 7th attack, which left 1,200 people dead and sparked Israel's offensive in Gaza. In the wake of the announcement, there is renewed hope that hostages could be brought home and the war could come to an end, though Hamas reiterated that hostages will not be released until there is a ceasefire in Gaza. Israel says it will not withdraw troops until all hostages are freed. For the first time since the heartbreaking news that their son, Israeli-American hostage Hersh Goldsberg Poland, was murdered in Gaza by his Hamas captors, his parents sat down for an interview this week. Hersh's case drew international attention, perhaps because of his parents' global advocacy for the hostages' release. Their son's hand was blown off when he tossed a Hamas grenade out of the bomb shelter where he and others were hiding. He survived that and was held captive for nearly a year before news of his murder in August, along with 5 other hostages in a Hamas tunnel. His parents told CNN they were stunned. World leaders did not en masse demand the release of the 254 people taken hostage immediately in the days after the October 7th attack. Now they worry about the 101 who remain.
The world failed so many of these hostages, including Hersh, and 101 remain in captivity. And maybe we, as a world, can do something to not fail them. That is what drives us as we deal with our own grief, is how do we make sure that 101 other families don't get the same conclusion, the same devastating news that we got.
Of those 101 remaining hostages, no one knows how many of them are still alive. The world awaits Israel's retaliation against Iran, which American officials expect could happen within weeks. The planned offensive comes after Iran fired nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel without warning. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told President Joe Biden on Wednesday that he planned to target Iran's military infrastructure rather than oil or nuclear facilities, a more limited counterstrike that could keep a full-scale war at bay. The Biden administration has authorized the deployment of an advanced anti-missile system to Israel, along with about 100 U.S. troops to operate it. The Pentagon says the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD battery, will help Israel defend against any future Iranian missile attacks, following its latest attack earlier this month. It is rare for the U.S. to deploy troops inside Israel, but deemed necessary now because of heightened tensions in the region. The THAAD missile defense system was deployed one other time to Israel during a training exercise in 2019. In the meantime, the Biden administration is warning Israel it risks losing its supply of U.S. weapons if it does not substantially increase humanitarian aid into Gaza. Conditions continue to deteriorate there, and aid has fallen by more than 50% from its peak. In a joint message from the U.S. State and Defense Departments, the Israelis were told the level of aid getting into Gaza must increase to at least 350 trucks a day, and there must be humanitarian pauses to allow for aid distribution. The White House says the message was not meant as a threat, but rather meant to convey a sense of urgency about the degree of civilian suffering in Gaza. FEMA has resumed door-to-door outreach in North Carolina communities hard hit by Hurricane Helene after threats caused workers to limit some relief efforts. Reports emerged of threats against FEMA employees in both North Carolina and Tennessee. One man armed with a rifle and handgun was arrested in North Carolina after he allegedly made comments about harming FEMA, but has since been placed on bail. The threats come as misinformation about the government's response to the hurricanes continues to spread. The head of FEMA says aid work will continue despite these threats and the rampant spread of misinformation.
So let me be clear. We are not going anywhere. We have over 2,000 people from the federal family in North Carolina, and misinformation will not deter us from our mission of helping people, period.
FEMA has approved more than $500 million in aid for residents and communities hit by hurricanes Helene and Milton. More than $96 million of that aid will go to households in North Carolina. The Biden administration is invoking wartime powers to bolster the production of IV fluids after Hurricane Helene flooded a major manufacturing plant in North Carolina. By invoking the Defense Production Act, the Department of Health and Human Services gives the plant priority access to materials needed to clean and rebuild. The plant supplies about 60% of IV fluids to hospitals across the country, many of which are now rationing supplies and even holding off on elective surgeries. From the Vatican, many delegates at the Synod on Synodality this week expressed tremendous pushback in response to a proposal to give bishops' conferences doctrinal authority, meaning some questions on church teaching would be decided at the local level. The proposal was initially included in the Synod's official working document at the beginning of the assembly, but was not discussed by the delegates until this Wednesday. Decentralizing doctrinal authority has been seen as a pivotal step for groups pushing for dramatic changes to the Catholic Church teaching, such as a female diaconate or greater acceptance of same-sex relationships. A.C. Wimmer, editor-in-chief of CNA Deutsch, says delegates from different parts of the world expressed concern the move would fracture church unity and authority.
These are prelates and thinkers that are saying if we start having local solutions that differ, then we run into the issue of credibility of the Catholic Church, first and foremost, and arguably even more problematic situations, namely that you have contradictory teachings, and depending on where a Catholic might live or go to Mass or, just live his life with their family, for instance, they might have different answers, and that is not what the Catholic Church is about.
These delegate discussions will be reflected in the Synod's final document, which will propose concrete ways to expand church participation. The document will then be presented to Pope Francis, who can approve the text or use it in his own teaching document. Next week, I will be in Rome with EWTN editorial director Dr. Matthew Bunson and Father Thomas Petrie of the Dominican House of Studies to bring you broadcast coverage during the Synod's closing week, October 21st through the 27th. Join us for a special report every night at 5 p.m. Eastern next week on EWTN. And when I travel to and from Rome, I won't be traveling alone. After more than 6 years of marriage and countless prayers, my husband Matthew and I are thrilled to announce we will be welcoming a baby girl in January. Her life is already a testimony to God's goodness and has been a reminder to us that God alone is the creator of life and that his timing is always perfect. My husband and I would just cherish your prayers for our daughter's health and for my health so that, God willing, we can hold this long-awaited for child in our arms in the new year. Today's final report when we come back. Finally today, a behind-the-scenes look at the incredible craftsmanship going on right now in St. Peter's Basilica as restoration work nears completion of the famous baldacchino structure above the Basilica's main altar. Designed by the artist Bernini in the 1600s, the famous structure has not been refurbished in nearly 300 years. Now, after 8 months of work, the restoration will be unveiled by Pope Francis as he celebrates Mass on October 27th at the end of the Synod on Synodality. This sneak peek in our images of the week. Such stunning craftsmanship. And that's it for this edition of EWTN News in Depth. I'm Catherine Hadro. Next week, our program will be preempted as the EWTN team and I provide coverage of the Synod on Synodality from our Vatican Bureau. We hope you will join us for that. And instead, during this time slot, we will air a special report, Wales, the Golden Thread of Faith. Have a great week, and God bless.